Okay, welcome to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 40. My name is jayoza. I'm the host of the show. And as always, I have Julie Wu Finkelstein joining me uh, as a co host. Okay, so I'm based out of Hazlet, New Jersey. We've been, as you can see, we've been doing this show now for pretty much the beginning of the year. And this is our episode 40. And one of the things that we try to do on this show is to kind of help people with public speaking, some of the topics that we think are going to help you become a better speaker, a more confident speaker. Also, we are affiliated, loosely affiliated with the Coursera's course, Introduction to Public Speaking, since we both are mentors for the international student body that takes that course. And once this show is done, I post this video on that Coursera's discussion forum for the students to take a look at when they get a chance. So we work with them. And one of the things that we try to do on this show is try to mentor by example. You know, we just don't want to become like just answering questions on the forum. I don't think that's helpful, but I don't think it's that helpful. What Julie and I try to do on this is we try to take realistic situation, such as things that you're going to come across. Like today, we're going to talk about some of the technique, one of the technique that Julie uses. So part of our mission for this Speech Talk Live is to teach people, but also to learn and also to practice, because you can't be an expert on public speaking. You got to be doing it. Okay, that's how you become good at it, and you're only as good as your last speech. So that's what we try to do, and we get some good feedback. We'd like to get more feedback and make sure that this is helping you, because at the end, you know, we're here to serve you. So if you have any questions that you would like to us to address, or if you want to record a video, which is what we would prefer, because this is about increasing your confidence, that would actually even be better. And if you want to have if you have something that if you have given a speech and you want to talk about it, hey, let us know. We'll put you on the show, and this is a good way to practice. So let's just talk a little bit about the agenda for today. Once I'm done, Julie will introduce herself quickly, and then we'll move on to our normal 3-minute segment, which is a freestyle where we get to talk for 3 minutes, approximately 3 minutes, on any topic. So this is our way of also practicing, right? You know, we've done 40 of these, but that doesn't mean we're, you know, we also want to get better, right? We're not to the point where we're good. Otherwise, if we're that good, then we wouldn't be doing the show. So we want to keep on improving, just like you all do. And after the 3-minute segment, we have three set segments, formal segments. And the first one is, it's going to be a little different today. We're going to do like an interview format where I'm going to interview Julie regarding the sandwich technique that she uses, and that's a lot of people use in crafting a speech and delivering it. So we're going to have a Q&A session for that. So it'll be like an interview. It's just something different that we have not done. Second segment is we're going to have it's a discussion topic. It's something that I've recorded, and it's about informative speech. And this is a question that I wanted to kind of have a discussion around. What exactly is the purpose of an informative speech? And I think the name is kind of a misnomer, because people think informative speech, we have to inform, but I think it's actually more than that. It's to sell. And the third one is something that keeps coming over and over again, and it has to do with part of it is how do you get better at your speaking. And one of the important things is that you always hear is practice, but there's another part that you don't hear much about is evaluation. I think evaluation is just as important. And I've recorded a video, and we're going to have a discussion around that. So that's the show for today. I hope you enjoy it. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please send it to us, because we want to make this show better so that it really helps you become a better and more confident speaker. So at this point, I'll have Julie do her quick intro, and then we'll move on to our 3-minute speech segment. Julie, go ahead.
Good morning, Jay. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Julie Wu Finkelstein. I live in Stamford, Connecticut. I am writing a book called Energetic Stretches to Empower Your Life. And the idea is we actually have all the energy we want. And it is our poor habits in posture and trauma that causes blockages. So these stretches will naturally release the blockages, and so the energy naturally flows. In addition, as Jay mentioned, I'm a Coursera mentor with this class, and recently I signed up for a really nice program. It's effective English, and there's several classes such as speaking and writing for foreign students, and I'm doing a beta test on that, and it's been very interesting. In fact, I'm having a conversation with the Coursera staff about the need for a QA process. So it'll be very exciting for me. Thank you.
Okay, Julie, thanks a lot. Let's just take a brief few second pause so we can start our next segment. Okay, welcome back. My name is Jayoza. This is Speech Talk Live, episode number 40. And I have with me today Julie Wu Finkelstein. And at this point, we're going to move to our 3-minute speech segment. And in this segment, what we do is we talk about any topic with minimal preparation. This is supposed to be, you prepare a little bit, but you come on and talk about it as a way of practicing. It's a kind of thing that we all tend to do, but we don't practice. You know, we just kind of wing it, and sometimes that may not be the right way to do it. Speaking is something that's so important that you do need to practice. So we use this segment as a way for anybody who's on the show to practice giving a quick speech for 3 minutes. And I always think that 3 minutes is about the time you need to get your point across. Okay, so today I had a tough decision because I had 2 speeches that I could give. One was on how do you make your content successful, and the other one had to do with this thing, this one program from Google called AlphaGo that defeated one of the top Go player. It's an old Chinese game, Go, which is very complex, and so I'm going to talk about that because I think it's a pretty interesting topic. So I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but this week Google they developed this AI, artificial intelligence program called AlphaGo, and it defeated a top human player named Lee Sedol. I think he's from Korea, if I'm not mistaken. They played 5 games, and the Google program defeated Lee Sedol 4 games to 1. Okay, 4 games to 1. Now, a lot of you might be saying, so what's a big deal? You know, computers are getting better. Eventually, they're going to take over. Let me explain what happened here. So many of you are probably, I'm going to step back a little bit here. Many of you are obviously saying that computers are doing more and more and are actually taking over a lot of the jobs that we humans think that only we could do, but that's no longer the case. And the computers are really moving up, kind of becoming almost equivalent to us. They're not there, but they're getting closer. Exactly being like us is still far away. We don't know how long that will take, if ever, okay? But let's not think that can't happen. And I'll give you, this should be somewhat scary. So many of you are probably familiar with that about 10 years ago, maybe more. Maybe it was in the late 90s when IBM's Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov, who's considered one of the greatest chess players of all time. And that time people were thinking like, oh, computers are going to take over eventually, right? Now, interesting thing about that particular achievement was that they used a kind of like a brute force method where they had enough computational power so that the computer program could look for moves ahead and eventually figure out the best move to make. So it was a sort of like, if you put enough computational power, eventually it was going to beat the top player, because the computer could look at so many moves that a human being is just not capable of doing. And it did that, and it defeated Garry Kasparov. Okay, You fast forward it to today, or just this week, and this AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol. Now the difference is that AlphaGo is a very complex game. It's a game played on a 19 by 19 grid, and the objective of the game is that if they use two color stones, white and black, I believe. And if you surround the stones, then you lose a stone. I'm not that familiar with the game, but that's how I understand it. I've never played it, but anyway, that's not the important part here. According to all the experts, this is a very complex game, and at the end, the person with more stones remaining on the board wins. Okay, that's the gist of what this game is. It's an old Chinese game developed more than 2,500 years ago. The important thing is that how this program became so good to defeat this top player. So it used two techniques. One is it used a method called deep learning. Now, deep learning is something we all do. The interesting thing is they made the computer do this, where they looked at all the past games and also play against the human to keep getting better, right? Now, there is another thing that I need to introduce here called Polanyi's paradox. It's coined by a philosopher named Michael Polanyi. And what this says is that if you're an expert, we know more than what we can explain. Okay, so what that means is that at some point, if a computer is going to beat you, how can an expert transfer knowledge to a computer when it's not possible? There's that paradox, right? We are good at what we do, but we can't communicate that so the computer can never beat us. That's the paradox. So what this AlphaGo did was it first learned using deep learning from past examples and also playing against humans. But then it had to do something different called reinforcement learning, where it played against itself like a million times so that it could learn from itself, because now the human is not going to tell them what the human does. So it had to play against itself. And using these two techniques, this program became so good that it was able to defeat the top player. Now, this has all kinds of consequences for the future. And my main takeaway point to point out is that computers are getting more and more sophisticated. And if you want to have a differentiation of any sort, you better work on your speaking skills, because that's about the only thing it looks like that the computers are going to have a hard time replacing us as far as connecting, influencing, and persuading. So if you think speaking is not important, think again. It may be one of the most important skill that will allow you to still be gainfully employed in the future, because everything else is eventually going to be taken over by a computer. And this AlphaGo is a perfect evidence on how sophisticated these programs are becoming now. So anyway, that's my brief little 3-minute talk. I'm going to actually go into this in more detail and make it a more formal speech that I'm going to be recording hopefully this weekend or maybe this week, because I think this is an interesting topic and it ties right into what we do here when it comes to public speaking. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to let her give her 3-minute speech.
Thanks, Jay. That was very, very interesting. I look forward to hearing more about it. Last week, I started talking about when I write a book or when I give a speech, I want it to be sexy. And there was quite a ripple of energy. So I'm going to take this energy and serve and increase that energy. So today, I want to talk my theme of the book, the speech today is that success is sexy. And so I want to share with you this idea that success is sexy in the sense that what I mean by sexiness. I'm going to give a little mnemonic for it. Also, I don't think we have time today, but I want to talk about some of the implications of that in an individual and society level. So I may just give a little sentence in the conclusion summary part. So I'll start with, we all want to be successful, but some of us are a little bit uncomfortable with the word sexy. And I want to use a little mnemonic because it helps us want to experience ourselves that way and also to present ourselves to the world that way. So that's kind of like what I mean by we want to have an identity that we're sexy, and that we want to have internal values that's relevant to that, and that we want to appear that way because it's attractive. And when we're attracted to people, people will naturally want to work with us, and that is a great factor for success. So basically, there's 4 words in sexy: X, S, E, X, Y. So to me, X means being engaged with the senses. When you're somewhere, you see things, you hear things, and you're actively engaged. The second word is energy or vitality, life force. You have the energy to do what you want. And the third word is X. X stands for excellence. Now, some of us are trapped into perfection. Excellence is not perfection. Excellence is a working process that helps you do the best you can at the moment and opens up the opportunity to do better the next time. But you don't get stuck at trying to be perfect and then do nothing at all. And finally, why? Why is for a youthful attitude, a sense of curiosity and delight in the world. So Shinro Suzuki, in his world-famous book, Beginner's Mind, says, in the expert's mind, there are very few possibilities. But in the beginner's mind, there is infinite possibilities. And I will add the word opportunities too. So you want to engage the senses because it brings you to the present. You want to have energy to do things that you want to do for you. That's important. You want to achieve or aim for excellence because that's the best you can be at any moment. And you want to have a youthful beginner's mind so that you're open to the opportunities ahead. When you have this kind of open attitude, you naturally become present because when you're paying attention to the world around you, all your neuroses drop off. And when you are present and you don't have neuroses, your natural vitality comes through. And in your chance to be open, engaged with beginner's mind, and having the energy to do that and striving to be the best you can be, whether you are talking to a friend, so you want to be of the greatest benefit to that conversation, or whether you're looking at a project and seeing the world as it is, it helps you to be successful. Because one, you are realistic and you're attuned to the present, but you're also optimistic because you can see opportunities and possibilities. And optimist realism is one of the things that is being very much talked about. And finally, I think optimum realism and being able to launch from that point makes you very attractive. You have a magnetic personality, and that will attract people who will want to succeed for you and with you. So in the world, this world of commerce, we have tendencies to be uncomfortable with the word sexy because the word sexy in the world of marketing has been so much used with the idea of physical intimacy. And one of my social beefs is that young girls and young boys are being quote unquote sexualized too early because their model of what's attractive is being able to have that physical intimacy. In fact, we know that there are many developmental stages before an individual is mature enough to handle that level of intensity. And furthermore, it's not good for society to be focusing on that one little area of success. So let's be a post-contemporary, let's reframe the word sexy to mean that we are present to our senses give us. So we're sensual, we're energetic because we're connected to our life forces, that we seek excellence in everything we do at the moment, and that we have a youthful aptitude of optimism. Let's reframe that, and so that we can be sexy at any age, and that we're attractive at any age. And you can do that by just thinking what does sexy mean for you, or what does having energy mean for you, and maybe just buy a new piece of clothing that reflect that, so you can align your inner values with your presentation of the self. So thank you.
Yeah, that was excellent, Julie. So I think if I understand it, when you say sexy, you mean what you're really saying is like kind of like being free in a sense, right? Free to express yourself, free to take risks. As some of the things you said here, senses, energy, being energetic, trying to achieve excellence. I think with excellence, if I understood correctly, you want to be in the moment and having that youthful attitude. So I agree. I agree that a lot of times we think of sexy in terms of physical, and I think what you're talking about is non-physical, mostly spiritual and mentally. You have to feel sexy because if and at some point that may lead to physical. Who knows? But what you're saying is that physical is not what the real sexy is. It's in your brain, and that's the part that makes you sexy, not anything to do with the physical, if I understood correctly. There was a book that you mentioned, someone named Suzuki. Is that the name? Beginner's Mind? Was that?
Yes, I like to answer your statement about free, but the book is Shinri Suzuki, and the title is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Zen?
And Zen, Z-E-N,
Yeah.
Mind, Beginner's Mind. And that book has outsold the Bible.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Suzuki? I never heard of this book. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps you know about the San Francisco Zen Center.
Mm-hmm.
Shinro Suzuki came over and started that Zen Center. So there's a lot of history there.
Okay,
Now, there's two Suzukis in the Zen America. That's oh my God, I forgot. There was a Suzuki before that, and he's actually from a very opposite school and a very opposite teachings. So that's very interesting. But to answer, I like when you say that it's being free, and I would not say that. I would not say that. I would agree that it's all about freedom, and what I would say is that it's not just about physical. Physical is just one piece of the puzzle. Because to have vitality, there's a physical element to it. Just as you said, even physical intimacy is part of being sexy, but that might be like 1% of what sexiness is.
It's not sustaining. That's, I think, how I understand it, because a lot of times when the word sexy comes, it's like people always think about it in one terms. What you have is some sort of like a three-legged or maybe four-legged stool, that there is that physical component. But if you lead with the physical component, then you're missing out on it's not life-sustaining. What you're talking about is that this has to be a much more broader. Your definition is much broader than just physical, because what you're saying is a lot of people, when they use the word sexy, they only think of physical aspect of it, and that's how the media, because that's easy to sell.
Yeah, or even just like having sexual intercourse, just leading to it, and that's it. And once you're done, that's it. So it is a very narrow picture. But I think that the word sex itself has so much energy. It wakes people up. We have to be a postmodernist. We have to reframe what that means. So that, and you know how in Star Wars, in the first one, Obi-Wan Kenobi is killed, right? And Obi-Wan Kenobi says, you kill me, but my energy lives on. So we can't just say sexiness is bad because the energy lives on. So what we really want to do is reframe that energy and integrate that into our lives. So kind of more like Tai Chi with it, rather than trying to kill it. It's impossible to kill something so fundamental.
All right. Yeah, we could discuss this for a long time. So at this point, we're going to take a pause and move on to our first segment. Okay. Okay, welcome back. This is Speech Talk Live, episode number 40. My name is jayoza, and this is segment number 1. And in this segment, I'm going to interview Julie Wu Finkelstein regarding this technique that she uses, known as the sandwich technique, when she is crafting and delivering her speech. So I'm going to start out by asking Julie to kind of give us, a quick intro of herself, and describe this technique. Spend a few minutes, tell us what this technique is and how she uses it, and then we'll have a discussion around this technique, because I'm interested on how to really effectively use this when it comes to speaking informally, formally. So at this point, let me, Julie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and this technique that you use called the sandwich technique. You're muted. You're muted. Okay.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so I spent, I'll just do a quickie. I was born in China. I went through Hong Kong and then in Canada, and I landed in the US. And I spent a decade in IT. I started out doing OH stuff, assembler programming, and I ended up having my own consulting company doing leading edge stuff of data warehousing. Back then it's called, but these days it's called big data, and also mission critical systems. One of the things that I learned early on that has been so useful for me is the sandwich technique, and I used it in many areas. I use it in oral communication. I use it to analyze a speech, and I also use it in my writing. So the sandwich technique is very simple, which is why I like it, and it has almost universal application. So that's another reason why I like it. So simple, easy, and lots of opportunities to use it. So the sandwich technique has 3 legs, as you were saying earlier. The first leg is tell people what you're going to tell them. The second leg is tell them all the gory details. And the third one is tell them the important points again and relate it to something in their lives. So tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Okay. So for example, when I look at your book even, or when I look at your speech, I like to say, well, what's he going to tell me? The key points. And then did he elaborate those in details? So for example, in your speech this morning, you talked about the AlphaGo, and you talked about what is important about it, and then you talked about the deep learning, the reinforcement learning, and then why is that important, right? Because it's a new way of learning, and then the summary. So in essence, when you tell me what you're going to tell me, it helps me to focus. Is it important to me? Is it, the ultimate question, is it sexy, let's say. The second question, the second part of it is, okay, now that I know it's sexy and you got my attention, I want to know how. Okay, so the first question is what? And it's really what because it's interesting to me. The second question is how, all the gory details. And the third one is really a kind of why, or a different kind of how. It's like, why is it important to me, and how do I take it into my life? When I make a phone conversation, if it's important, I will do that. And so one of my own personal additions is the bottom part. I always try to have an actionable step, because that brings it into people's lives. So I'll turn that over to you now, and I'd like to know when, have you ever, have you ever used it, or what you think about that?
Yeah, Julie, thanks. Yeah, I like this technique because, as you mentioned, it's simple, it's easy, and it's pretty universal. I'll tell you what I really like about. I think there are several things I like about this technique because it allows you to. There's a part about when you are trying to come up with the speech, like if you have a very limited amount of time and you have to say something, then you want to kind of think in this term, like, what do you really want to tell people? Like, that's the first step, right? What do you want to tell people? I want to tell people about AlphaGo. Okay, what are the details you want to tell them about that? How this program was able to defeat the top player using the following techniques. That may be enough, maybe 1 or 2 points there, and then tell them that here's why I told them and why this is so important and what's the implication of that. There is one other part of it, maybe if there is a call to action so people can get more information. The other thing I like about this technique, which a lot of people don't think about, and this is something that a lot of people get scared when they're talking in public, is that you have to speak from memory. And using this method, it allows you to speak without resorting to notes, because you know exactly what you want to tell somebody. Then you go tell them that, and then you conclude with that. So you don't have to really need any kind of notes, because sometimes when people use like a card and all that, I think it kind of diminishes their credibility. Like, wait a second, why is this person not able to you connect better, right? Because when you're using notes, you're looking down. So right away, if you believe it, what Amy Cuddy says, that you're looking down, you're not in a power position at this point. You're in a differential position. So I think this technique allows you to be more confident because you already have what you want to say, and you can now do it in a very concise manner. You look confident, and also you're confident that your audience is going to understand what you're saying. So I actually think that if somebody's starting out, or even if you're an expert, this is all reliable, always works. It's always worked with people all the time, and you don't need to make life too complicated. Just use this technique. Yeah, so that's why I agree with you. I think this is a technique that everybody should be. Speaking is hard. So let me just, if I may take another minute. Speaking is hard. It's difficult. Don't make it too complicated on yourself. Use this technique, and unless you get to the point where you need to give us some big speech, but any speech at the end, it's not about making it complicated. It's making people understand it. So this may be the only technique you will ever need to be an effective, I like to call it, good to great speaker. But what do you think about that, Julie?
Yeah, I think that's true. Speaking is hard, and as you've mentioned, that often in life we're asked to speak. Sometimes we can't even memorize it because we're asked to speak on the spot. So what I like to do is use this technique in conjunction with the impromptu speech technique. So the impromptu speech technique tells me, give me one idea, the thesis, some kind of supporting evidence, and linking that evidence to making a relationship between the support and the idea. So for example, and sometimes for me, I forget that last step. So I would say, for example, I would say, based on my speech this morning, I would say, success is sexy, because people who are successful people have a lot of energy. But what I have usually failed to do is say, well, energy makes things happen, and that makes it attractive, and that is what success is about: being able to attract people to help you to get the things done. So if you say, well, today I'm going to talk about success, and my whole point is success is sexy because it's attractive. when you're sexy, you're attractive. And the reason why sexiness brings about success is because when you're attractive, then people will want to help you to succeed. And nothing is done in this world by itself, you know. So that's my idea. And then I might have another idea. So I will say, you know, the introductions. Today I'm going to talk about success is sexy and how you can become sexy. And then I will add that second point. And then the conclusion is, well, we want to be successful because we want to live our lives. And this is how we can do it, by being sexy and by being alive, being engaged, and having an open mind. So these three components, the sandwich, is give them a taste, give them all the details, and then give them the dessert. You know, give them an appetizer, give them the meal, and then give them the dessert is another way to say it. So the opening has to be very attractive, you know, it has to be engaging. The details has to be simple and clear. And the solution, the conclusion has to be, again, clearly encapsulating the whole message. And as you mentioned, something actionable, maybe how they can get more information or how they can get more into their lives. So even like, and I've shared that with you, for another example, I'll quickly say that I wanted to propose a QA process for the beta course I'm taking. And so I wrote an email. I used the sandwich technique. I said, you know, there are major problems in this class, and it should be caught before the beta. And then I list some major ideas of that QA will catch, and then I summarize it with, it's expensive to launch a class. Doing a QA process helps you to reduce your risks and save money at the end. So it was successful. I was invited to have another discussion with them. So, yeah.
Right. Let me ask you this question. And sometimes I think a lot of people, when we're speaking, we don't really think about it because we're so much into what we want to say. And it's sort of like something I was thinking about, and it's something that I should actually do a speech on. It's like I was looking at a water bottle and I said, wow, you know, water is free. You know, anybody can get water for free. But when you market it and package it, that free has a value, right? And when it comes to the sandwich technique, it's not what you're saying that really matters to people. It's how organized you are and how you are saying it matters more than what you're actually saying. Because if the organization, people follow the organization of your speech more than they follow exactly what you're saying, because they're not going to be able to process the entire sentence. But if you give them the organization, that they have something to kind of think about, that, oh, it's organized speech. That organization itself reflects well on what you're going to say. And I think the sandwich technique allows you to come across much smarter, because when, like, if you know, you met a lot of smart people, sometimes they just cannot organize their thought. Little teenagers and children have a lot of problem with that. Even adults do too. They're not organized in the thinking. But if somebody's organized, you put more importance on the organization than what they're actually saying, because a lot of times we don't get a chance to look at somebody's transcript. We're just hearing them speak just once. So what do you think about that? Do you think that the sandwich technique makes your speech, it's like you're plussing your speech if it's just an ordinary speech, but if you organize it using this technique, it makes you come across as a much more credible and a knowledgeable person because of how you organized it using this technique?
Well, that's a great idea, Jay. I never thought about that. What I got from what you said is that the sandwich techniques helps you to be organized. And being organized makes you appear smarter. and having greater credibility. And I agree with that. In fact, I'm writing down that. Oh, the other thing is you can really take the information in. Um, if something is not organized, it's hard for me to know what the person is talking about. So from a learner point of view, organized speech, which the sandwich technique gives you, helps me to really learn the material. The other thing that's interesting that we could maybe explore in another topic is when you are organized, you are really giving the learner both the foreground and the background. And the organization is part of that background component. So bringing in Marshall McLuhan's thesis, the media is the message. What he's really saying is the background is part of that experience at the moment. So what I am, not that you said it, but what I am inferring and extrapolating what you say is when something is organized, it affects the background experience to be more comfortable and the audience feels more relatable and is able to handle over a certain level of permission to listen to the audience, to the speaker, and that's where credibility comes in. So when someone's more credible to me as a learner, I naturally am more receptive to more information.
There is another point here, and I mean, this is like suddenly I'm thinking about all these different things. There are several things I've jotted down here, but let me point this out, why this technique is also very effective. We human beings operate on patterns. We match patterns. And when you see a pattern, that automatically means that your brain suddenly starts focusing, saying, I understand that pattern. Like when we do anything, we drive, we are looking at patterns. You know, we're not looking at like when you walk, there are certain patterns that we follow, whether it comes to reading. If you see a pattern, then immediately we process the information much better. And the sandwich technique allows us, the audience, or to see the pattern in your thought. And that pattern makes them feel smarter because they figured out the pattern of your speech. The other thing that it does is, from audience's point of view, is for both point of view, is that a lot of times you have seen that when you give people an opportunity to speak at a meeting or something, they really have no focus. And when you don't have a focus, and these are pretty high stakes meeting, people they'll politely say thank you, and that's about it. Unless you get somebody to interact with you, and people interact when they understand what you're saying. So this is a quick way of testing that the pattern is well understood, then they can interact. And when they're interacting with you, it's allowing you to know that you just made that person smarter, and that person, because he feels smarter about himself, he now thinks that you're smarter. So there's a lot in this technique that's more than just like, so I think it's much more than just saying, oh, this technique is all about telling them what you want to tell them, and then, but there are a lot of, if there people ever do science behind this, there's a lot that they can find why this technique is so effective, and it may be the only technique you need to become an effective speaker. So any closing thoughts before we close this out? Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I thought I was muted, so then I mute myself when I meant to unmute. Yeah, I think that there's a depth and a wisdom to this process that you are really helping to highlight for me. And I would just say that this sandwich technique works in a simple thing as a telephone communication. It works when it works in a major speech or major book that I am writing. The book I'm writing is not a major book, but even in a major book, because it helps you to organize, as you say. And it works at high levels, such as a book or a big speech, but it also works at the smaller micro level as a paragraph. In a paragraph, you you want to have a introductory sentence to the paragraph telling people what the one idea in the paragraph is about, the details of that, and you want that last sentence in the paragraph to be both a summary, conclusive, and a transitional sentence into the next paragraph. So the sandwich technique, the last part, telling them what you told them, plays a really, really major role. And finally, I would just say it's really good for impromptu, spontaneous situations. How many times, let me ask you, Jay, and I'll turn this over to you. How many times, like you're in a networking situation, in a staff meeting, you bump into your senior manager and they ask you a question? What an opportunity to sound smart and look sexy. So what do you think about that? Maybe you can give us an example in your life that this technique would have been really useful. And then we can wrap up.
Yeah. So let me just tell you an embarrassing story. This was when I was youthful. I must have been in my 20s, I believe. And I had joined this company at that time. It used to be called Perkin-Elmer, and I think then it became Concurrent Computer Corporation. And we were at there was some unveiling of a new computer or something, and they had invited us since I was involved in developing software, diagnostic software. So we got invited, and the CEO and the president and the vice president were chatting. And I was like, wow, I've never gotten to see like the president and the vice president. So I just like kind of went and just barged into their conversation. Said, oh, hi, my name is Jayoza. And, they were nice and polite, but I had like no real focus. I never used any technique. I didn't have anything to really say, but just to kind of introduce myself. And I kind of lost an opportunity because, like I said, sometimes you don't get an opportunity to meet with people. And if you're not prepared, and that time, I didn't really know what to expect. I was kind of young at that time. Now, I don't want to use that as an excuse because this is a technique that even children can learn. So I don't want to say that I blame it on my youthfulness or anything like that. I just didn't know this technique. But if I had known this technique, then I could have just hacked something quickly and saying, I want to go in there and tell them about this computer and some of the things based on how important it is for the company and all that. And I think it would have made a very good impression. And as it turned out, I think I embarrassed my boss because he immediately came and just kind of helped me out and saying, oh, by the way, yeah, because they knew him really well. They didn't know me. And afterwards, I realized that I shouldn't have done it. I should have just worked with him and he could have introduced me, and that would have been more effective. So I still remember that because in one sense, I was so excited, but at the other sense, being excited and taking the initiative is good, but then I didn't have anything else to sustain that. And I think the sandwich technique that you talk about, that we're talking about right now, is the technique you should use before you ever try to get into any kind of conversation. So there is a focus there, that you're not just all over the map, because being all over the map reflects kind of poorly on you. Just to kind of give you like a little funny story, because one time we had gone as a family on a vacation with my sister and her family and my family to that place. What is that place in San Francisco where they have prisoners? They put prisoners. I forgot the name. That's that island there that they used to put.
San Quentin?
No, not San Quentin. I forgot the name. It's near San Francisco. I forgot the name. Anyway, not anymore. I think the last prisoner they had. It's impossible. The Rock. There was a movie called The Rock that was based on that, right? And so at one point, somebody asked, like, does anybody have a question? And at that time, my nephew was kind of young. I think it was 4 or 5. He raises his hand, and the person says, yes, what's your question? And he had no question. He said, today's my dad's birthday. So they started serenading my brother-in-law with happy birthday. And I just remembered that like if you're gonna open your mouth, well, he was only 4 years old, so I can give him an excuse. But it just goes to show that if you're gonna open your mouth, you better make sure that you have something to say rather than, "Hey, today's my dad's birthday." I thought it was funny. Anyway, I think we covered this topic pretty well. So let's take a break and move on to
Let
our.
me just thank you, Jay. I want to take a minute to thank you for inviting me in to do a dialogue on the sandwich technique, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think that was the whole point. You brought your A game, and the whole point of it is that you got other people to think about it, and this is what the whole purpose is. That sometimes when you do a Q&A, you can go into more detail rather than just going back and forth. There's much more interactivity there. So I think it's very helpful. It's something we should do more often. So thank you very much. And at this point, I will take a quick pause, and then we'll move on to our next segment. Okay, welcome back. My name is Jayoza, and this is Speech Talk Live episode number 40. And this is segment number 2. And in this segment, we're going to have a discussion around giving an informative speech. And I had recorded a 10-minute video to kind of talk about this in more detail. Here, what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a highlight of an informative speech, how I view an informative speech. I believe the speech is a little tricky because a lot of people give informative speeches, okay? That's the speech that most people give because they have something to inform. But I think people tend to miss one thing, that people can only, the audience, the people that are listening to you, can only process such limited amount of information. And the information that you are conveying has to have some value to the audience. Otherwise, you're just wasting time, or you're just occupying space and talking. So I think an informative speech has to be looked at in a different manner. You're informing, but also what you're doing is you are selling the information, is what you're really doing. Because unless you're preaching to the choir, then they're going to be there for the entirety. They like you, they love you, and they know exactly what to expect. But if you're in a situation where you really don't know the audience makeup, like you don't know whether I'm assuming that you're giving this when you're not getting paid, okay? So that's what I'm assuming here. Let's say you've been asked to give a talk on something where people are not paying you, okay? Because when they're paying you, then it's a different dynamics altogether because you're getting paid. So there you got to bring your A game. And here you're bringing A game. But when you don't know the audience, the thing you're really trying to do is you don't know whether that information has any value to them. And you don't want to give them, you don't want to just go there and just entertain them unless they're expecting entertainment. And one other thing about entertaining is fine, but don't overdo it. And entertaining is fine when people are expecting entertainment. But when people are not expecting entertainment and you're entertaining, then it backfires. Then they think like, oh God, this guy was a total joke. He didn't give me what I came to, to the event to get out of being there. So you have to kind of think about this, balance it, that you're going to give them information, but you have to sell that information. And a lot of times what you do is if you have something to tell them, there has to be something that they can go to, so you know whether that information, for some people, what you're giving them is sufficient. That's as far as it's going to go. But that's not the end of it. There are people always in the audience who want more, and you should be able to point them out to whether it's whether it's a book, whether it's something that you have developed. Because as you go deeper into it, then it becomes not, and you kind of moving from that spectrum of being on the entertainment info side to mostly information to the point of actually making it happen, right? So you kind of, in the middle, it's all information. In the left, you could be all entertainment, but that's not going to work. You want to be kind of between entertainment and information. And then as people see more value in it, you give them more information to the point where they actually can achieve that. And that's how I like to think of an informative speech. Informative speech is not there where you're going to go them and just inform just everything that you know. That's not the purpose of an informative speech. You need to know what kind of information are they ready to take from you, and then you can move on to the next step. And it doesn't have to be, if it's a free course, then that's a free course, but you have to see what the value is. You don't want to just move people to something that there's no interest in that. So it's something I wanted to discuss, because a lot of times we think of like, okay, I have something to inform and I'm just going to just do a great job informing it. You may do a great job informing it, but will it achieve your objective? And I like to find out that when I'm informing something to people, it's adding some value to them. If there's more value that they want, then they can go to somewhere else and get additional value. So I need to know exactly what type of value that I'm adding to the people. And it's for me to find out whether my information, I need some validation, whether that information is actually helping them. If some information I'm giving them is not helping them, then that's where it ends, and that's fine. Everybody can't just suddenly come to you and say, hey, I want more, I'll take your course, or I'll do one, can you coach me one-on-one? It's like sort of like in sales, you have a funnel. This is like an informative funnel, sort of, is what I'm talking about here. It's a concept that, that you see in sales all the time. And Julie, since you're writing a book and you're going to be dealing with it, since I'm also currently working on a book, I believe, what do you think about it? Because we have to be careful that you're not giving them more. You want to give them enough of it to get, like you said, the sexy part of it to get them excited, so that they come to you and saying, Julie, I want to know more about this. Where do I get more information? And then after that, there could be a book. And if people want more than a book, then saying, Julie, do you offer any kind of workshop where I can get even more information so I can really learn from a person who is a practitioner? So you've got to be able to think about it that way. Like, how do you move people from getting the information to getting more information to actually implementing that information? Okay, so I'll what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Jay, I actually thought it was a really great idea. Why I got, you were using the 60-30%. The 60% value I got was for me was the innovative idea that informative speech is selling information. Excuse me. It has to, one, demonstrate value, and two, motivate the listener, the audience, to go further. And the 30 I got was, I thought the speech was organized really well. Excuse me, I do agree with you. I also have two points of improvement from your speech. So I like the idea. I think it's great. I would definitely want to use it in my speeches in the future. And I think you've made speeches like that in the past, where you talk about information is not boring. The two constructive feedback ideas I want to give you, and of course you can do what you want. It's my practice to be a better evaluator, which is what your next speech is about. So the first thing is, when you said, if your informative speech doesn't sell, you do not achieve your objective. And I thought not achieving your objective could be replaced with the word fail. So it's just more to the point, powerful speech. And then I came up with the tagline: if you don't sell your informative speech, if you don't sell, you fail. So
what is the first one?
I was just saying, the replacing, not achieving your objective, replacing those words with the simple word fail.
Fail?
F-A-I-L.
Oh, fail. Okay.
And then it came up with the tagline: if you don't sell, you fail.
Oh, I see. Rhyming. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good.
The second point I want to share with you is, you used the word upselling, and you said upselling has a negative content. It's sleazy, but you never defined what upselling was. And so I think it would have been a little bit more effective for me as an audience if you tell me what upselling is, you define that term, and then you can say why people think it's sleazy, and then you reframe that to how it's not sleazy, because it's adding value.
Right. Good.
And I really like your organization, as I said, and I really like this what I call reframing, a switch in perspective in the informative cells, even in an informative speech, you still have to show value. So I appreciate that. So I agree with you.
Yeah, right. The word, yeah, upselling. I knew that I didn't want to go into it in too much detail there because then it would have been like. But I think you're right. I should have spent a little bit.
You could just spare us 30 seconds. Upselling
Yeah,
means
because
something.
upselling is commonly it has a negative connotation because what it means is that you're really hard sell, right? Where your main purpose is not okay. What upselling really the reason it has a negative connotation is that your main.
Wait, what is upselling? The first thing you have to say is upselling means you already sold something and you want to sell them something more.
Yeah, you want to sell them more. If you basically want to, your whole point of having them come there is not to really give them any real good, useful information, but it's to sell something more. And that's what you do. You always get like if you come to this, it's something that that's the charge that people are leveling against Trump University, that it was nothing but an upselling program, right? And I've been to some of these. Like I went to one time a Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the first one they say it's free, and all they try to do is constantly are upselling. And after a while, I'm like, I didn't get anything out of it. That for me, because they know that if you're stupid enough to come there, then you're going to be taken in by their next program, which is like, oh, if you really want information, you got to come to this 3-day event. Then after a 3-day event, if you really want to be successful, you got to come to a retreat. And if you really want to come be successful.
Okay, that's all you have to say. That's all you have to say.
Right. So
that's my whole point. I didn't know what upselling was. And so if you say upselling is when all you need to say is, I'm trying to say it doesn't take much time, because all you have to say is something like, upselling is when you're there and they want to sell you something more. And because of that, people feel that they're manipulated. And that's why there's a sleazy, considered a sleazy practice. But here, I'm going to show you a positive value to upselling. So I'm just saying you need to do that so I know where you're taking me.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I get what you're saying. Thank you.
I think I think we pretty much covered it, because otherwise we could spend more time on trying to define upselling. Because I was just using the word upsell, but in a different context. But then I had to make sure that people didn't view that like that when you're giving an informative speech, you're kind of engaging in some kind of a sleazy little technique. All I'm saying is that there has to be something else that people can get to. Otherwise, you don't know what value you're really adding with your informative speech. All right, let's just take a pause and move on to our next segment. Thanks a lot, Julie. Thanks for your feedback. Okay, welcome back. My name is Jayoza. This is Speech Talk Live, episode number 40. And this is segment number 3. And this segment, we're going to talk about evaluation. And this is something we have talked about in the past, but I think it's worth coming back to this again and again, because a lot of times, people want to improve. And the common thing you always hear somebody tell other so-called experts is, you got to practice, you got to practice, you got to practice. And I agree that you do have to practice. I think everybody knows that. You have to practice if you are. But the one thing you also have to do really well is you can only practice based on some feedback you're receiving. So you need to also learn about evaluation, because if you don't know how to evaluate yourself and how to seek evaluation and how to even give evaluation, then the question is, how do you improve? You could be practicing hard, but you could be practicing hard your bad habits. And the purpose of speaking is not to keep on practicing. The purpose of practicing is to improve. And the only way, one of the best way to improve is if you're also good at giving and receiving evaluation. So I recorded a short video that kind of speaks to that you have to think about evaluation. First is you got to set up a kind of a baseline. That baseline is set based on your own evaluation, because you have just. Hey, Julie, can you mute your line, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, because otherwise this thing keeps switching back and forth based on the noise, and that's why. Yeah, that's fine. So what happens is that, like, let's say I have recorded a formal speech, which I'm going to do on this topic of this AI program that Google just defeated the top player, AlphaGo. Now, after I record that speech, I'm going to evaluate myself. So I have a baseline. Okay, I said, okay, I've done my evaluation based on what I was trying to achieve, and I'll have like 3 things that I think I did well. Then 3 things that I think I could improve. Okay, at least I have to find 3 things that I could get better at. Maybe, maybe not, but at least I have to identify 3. Once I have that, so this is the point where I am seeking evaluation. I can go to Julie and say, Julie, what do you think about these 3 areas that I need to improve, or 3 areas that I think I did well? And if she gives me some feedback, either it could be validating that, or it could be saying, well, there are certain things that I saw differently. Now, that's helpful, okay? Not saying that she's right, but she's taking a totally different outlook. Now, her outlook could be, it's her unique outlook. I can't say whether she's right or wrong. That's, at the end, that's for me to determine. But at least now I have some feedback to consider. And this is time consuming. And that's one of the reasons why people don't practice. And what they don't even do beyond practice is they don't get any kind of evaluation from anybody. Unless you're getting that evaluation, I just can't see how you can really improve in the skill. Public speaking is so difficult that that you need real good evaluators. You got to train yourself to be a good evaluator, and you got to be lucky enough to work with someone like Julie, who can actually evaluate your speech and give you some real good feedback, like she did in the segment 2 when I used the word upselling, and she quickly pointed out that I needed to define that. Maybe a minute and just define what upselling was. That kind of evaluation is very helpful, because that you're not going to get from anybody. That requires some level of expertise. So as you're working on trying to become, a good to great speaker, you first have to learn how to evaluate your own speeches, so that you clearly know the 3 things that you did well and 3 things you think you need to improve. You've got to have that. That's your baseline. Then you need to go to someone like Julie, who also is a pretty competent speaker, or somebody who's a good student of speaking and is constantly working on trying to become a better speaker, and then have her evaluate specific things that you've already identified. Don't ask for blind evaluation. That's not going to be that helpful, because that's just somebody's opinion, right? And if you're seeking somebody's opinion, but fine, but the purpose is that you need to know what specific areas that you have already identified. Because if you get too much, you're not going to do anything with it. If it's very targeted, and at the end, you can only improve maybe 1 or 2 things. She only gave me 1 really thing that I can take away, which was upselling. That's the part that I can work with. If she had given me 3, 4 things, then I couldn't use any of it, because it's just not possible. Human beings just don't work that way. So she just pointed out 1 thing, that if you had that 1 thing fixed, then your speech would be more effective. Okay, it may be effective, but it could be more effective, something that I should consider. That's the kind of evaluation you want, okay? That you got to identify particular areas you want to target. Now, this one, I didn't even think about it. I just used the word, didn't even think about it, but she picked it up. So evaluation is something you really have to think about. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to improve on becoming a good, great speaker. Julia, any comments?
Thank you. I actually did the same thing that I did with the other speech, so I totally agree with you. And in your 60-30-10 model, for the 60 that I can take and use is I really like the elegant simplicity of your speech. I just thought that this was one of the most simple in a sublime way, because in the Professor McGarrity talk about the sublime simplicity of speeches. And so that was my number 1. The second one, that I really liked was the 30% was the nice content. So I think it's very nice to know I thought it was it has value to know that when you when you look for evaluation, it's very important because it helps the practice, makes your practice effective. And the two guidelines for how to find the right evaluation or evaluator is, one is find a qualified evaluator, someone who is knowledgeable and qualified. And the second thing I go was give them guidelines on what feedback, what evaluation you want. So the title that makes it meaningful for me, and I'm not making a suggestion here, but that's the meaning I got from it. Evaluation makes your practice more effective. So you need to practice, but practice without evaluation doesn't get you, and it doesn't get you anywhere quickly. But practice with evaluation, with good evaluation, accelerates your progress. So I thought it was really great speech. I thought the information itself was useful, and I thought it was presented in a way as what you said in the organization, that because it's organized, it makes you look smarter and makes me learn better. So overall, a very nice experience.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So that's good. Thanks a lot. So because you, I think, follow this, because whenever you give a speech, it's always important to tell somebody what you think you did well, because you have to be able to see that, right? Because if you don't think you did anything well, then it's a different problem. But there has to be something you have to like about it, assuming that you did put the effort into your speech. Not saying, again, we're not trying to make our speeches perfect here, because there has to be certain things that can be improved. Every speech has something that can be improved. All right, there are no such thing as a perfect speech, because everybody's hearing and how they process it is going to be different. The thing is that you do want to, because now that you have recorded quite a few speeches, you have to go back and do look at your speech before you actually get somebody's feedback. Because I know sometimes when you record a speech, you just want to be done with it because you just had it. But you really need to take a look at it and saying, what I found is that when you record your own speech, you're going to be more critical because you're too close to it. And that's why it's not good either. So the reason why you do need to get evaluated is because you might be looking on the wrong stuff and you might be too hard on yourself. And if you can get some feedback from somebody, and you have to give the permission like we discussed in the past, then you will find out that perhaps you are being too critical and perhaps you're trying to make your speech too perfect. And the purpose of an evaluation is saying, you know what? Overall, your speech was good, but now you're asking me to go into deeper. Here are certain things you may want to fix, but overall, the speech was fine. But these are the things that could make it, if you want to improve it, these are the areas you can work on. Because one thing you don't want to do is spend so much time like these TED speakers do. And one of my biggest criticism of TED speeches is that sometimes they look like they're too perfect. And part of speeches is that a speech should be relatable, and people like to see certain flaws, and not flaws that are destroys that impacts the speech, but flaws that makes the person more relatable. And sometimes you don't get that with the TED speeches because they're just so perfect. And I'm of the opinion that when I'm speaking, I don't want to be perfect. I want to be relatable, because perfection is one of those things that the bar is just impossible to ever hit. And if somebody then tells me, Jay, your speech had a problem, you're going to get devastated. But I'd rather hear that, your speech really moved me. That's the kind of feedback you really want. If you want, that doesn't mean that person said your speech was perfect, but you achieved your objective, because your objective was to move somebody in your personal story, like what you're doing with your exercise and how it has helped you transform yourself with some of the difficulties you've had. That makes you more relatable than saying, Julie, your speech really moved me, but here's some of the things you can do. Those are not important things. That's why I always like to use the 60-30-10 principle, because if the 10% is the perfection part, then that's where it belongs, or maybe it doesn't even belong there. Anyway, so I think that to finish what I'm saying is that we all, no matter how good you are, have to work on evaluation. Because I'll tell you right now, there are a lot of people out there who are giving speeches who are supposed to be experts, and I don't think they ever spend the time that we're spending here trying to look at what kind of words come out of our mouth, what kind of impact. I think a lot of people out there are just winging it because they can, because they got the title, so they can wing it. And as a result, when you wing it, it's there is a consequence for that. There are people that say a lot of things, and today with the YouTube and the social media, everything you say is going to be available, that people are going to use it and dissect it. So you got to be very careful what you say, because you're one YouTube clip away from being irrelevant. And some people actually thrive on that. That's their overall model. But I just think that that with speaking, I think that people do spend a lot of time on writing, evaluating their writing, but I don't think they spend that much time evaluating their speaking. Any thought on that, between writing, evaluating somebody's written material compared to evaluating their speeches or what they're saying?
Yes, we need to evaluate writing and speaking. So that's a great speech. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, Julie, thanks a lot. So at this point, I'm going to try to, any closing thoughts on the show? Anything that you learned?
Yeah, thank you. Great show. Yeah, I learned any kind of speech has to sell or at least demonstrate value. And we need to have some kind of action to help people integrate stuff into their lives. And appreciate your thoughts about the sandwich technique, and the organization helps both the speaker to be appear smarter, and for the learner to become smarter. So great program today. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, so I'll just close this out. So I'm going to go back and view this show again, because I'm going to take some of the ideas that we discussed on all three segments. I think all three segments, in fact, the entire show, and even the segment the 3-minute speech that you gave on success is sexy. And I'm going to incorporate that in the book, and I may have to even refer to the show that these ideas came from the show. So I think this is something that I think if you're writing a book, it's a good way. So let me just close out the show. I agree. I think this was a good show. So one of the things that I forgot to mention in the beginning of the show is that I'm currently writing a book, and I'm still working on a title. So if you have a title, let me know. Some of the title that I've been going with up to this point is How to Become a Good to Great Speaker. But another title that I just came up with is Speaker on Fire. So that's one of the ones that I'm thinking of using. And the title is important because the book has to kind of reflect that being a speaker on fire. The other thing I'm going to say is this. So the way in my book is structured is that I tell people, like, a lot of people are functional. They have not, like, amount of time we've spent here. By the way, what we're doing here isn't beginner stuff. Okay, so I just want to make it clear. So if you're watching this and saying, oh, how do I get to this? No, the first thing you have to do is go from functional to good. And there are some special exercises that I tell you, like the goals video, the Coursera course, and then the 330. If you do that much, then you can say, because most people don't even do this, by the way, you are definitely, in my opinion, a good speaker if you do that, okay? Then if you want to continue that, like Julie and I are doing, how to go from good to great, and that's a big spectrum, right? And one of the last two steps I have is that you do a show like this, Speech Talk Live. This is advanced stuff because we're putting ourselves out there. And this show will go on YouTube that anybody can watch. 7 billion people will be able to watch this, okay? And one day that will happen. With Julie, I think that will happen. So that's why I have Julie on the show, to get the ratings up there. So this is the only thing that would come after this. So if you're wondering, like, okay, this is advanced, doing your own show like Speech Talk, and this is a show you can do on any topic you want. It's not that difficult, but you have to get to this level. It's a lot of work, okay? So I don't make it seem like this is easy. As you can see, there's a lot of preparation that goes into this. The thing that goes after this is actually going out and speaking in front of people as often as you get a chance to, often as you want to do. And then the only thing after that is getting paid to speak. Now, some people, I'm not that keen on getting paid to speak because I have other objectives. But occasionally, if somebody really likes what I have to say and is willing to have me come and give a speech to an audience that are paying money, hey, I'm certainly open to doing that. So that's the progression we're talking about, right? This is almost like the last step, that if you're doing this, means you have put in a lot of content out there. You have gotten experience in speaking in front of a camera. Now you're going to be able to take this, because let me tell you, after a while, you internalize all this stuff, okay? Julie and I have internalized all this stuff. So if Julie's going out in front of people, she has now given these speeches many times on the show, on her video recording, that when she's in front of people, she's going to feel perfect. I mean, she'll be nervous, but she'll be able to get through it. And she's already done it. She can use this as a mental model, like, hey, I did it on the show, I can do it in front of the people. So this is something I just wanted to kind of get across, that a lot of people are wondering, how do I get from functional to good to great? Well, this is how you do it. It's incremental, but it's all doable as we're doing it. And this does take time. So let me just close out and say that, you are how you speak, but you do control that. You do control that in taking this Coursera course, which is a free course that anybody can take, recording your speeches, doing this type of show like Speech Talk Live, and keep on raising the bar. And if you keep on raising the bar, doing all the stuff that we discussed today, such as thinking about informative speech, how to sell that informative speech, how to evaluate, how to baseline your evaluation, believe me, very few people I see out there doing all this, okay? So if you want to become a good to great speaker, it's not that difficult. You just got to put in some time, and you too can become that. So thank you for watching. And as usual, if you have any comments, suggestions, any kind of feedback, anything we can do to help you, just let us know. And we'll see you next week for episode number 41. Thank you for watching.